Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at the letter. After 5 years of marriage, her past had finally caught up with her. She never thought this day would come. She never thought she'd have to choose between the truth and the man she loved more than life itself. James had no idea who he'd really married. Their love story began like a fairy tale. Sarah Henderson was the quiet bookstore owner with the infectious laugh. James Mitchell was the charming architect who kept, accidentally, visiting her store 3 times in 1 week. Their connection was instant, the kind people spend lifetimes searching for. When James proposed after just 8 months, Sarah said yes without hesitation. The wedding was small but perfect. In his vows, James promised there would never be secrets between them. Complete honesty, he'd said, his eyes shining with sincerity. That's the foundation we'll build our life on. Sarah had nodded, smiling through tears, knowing she was already breaking that promise. For the first 3 years, they were blissfully happy. They bought a cozy craftsman home in the suburbs, planted a garden together, and talked about starting a family. James never questioned why Sarah had no family at their wedding, or why she never wanted to visit her hometown. He accepted her explanation that she'd had a difficult childhood and preferred leaving the past behind. But then came the first sign something wasn't right. The phone call arrived on a Tuesday evening while James was grilling steaks in the backyard. Sarah answered, expecting it to be her friend Melissa. Instead, a man's voice, deep and unsettlingly familiar, said only 5 words, "I know where you are." Sarah hung up immediately, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. When James came inside, he found her sitting motionless at the kitchen counter, her face drained of color. "Who was that on the phone?" he asked, setting down the plate of steaks. "Wrong number," she managed to say. That night, while James slept peacefully beside her, Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how much time she had left before everything fell apart. The calls continued. Sometimes just breathing on the other end. Sometimes cryptic messages. Sarah changed her number twice, but somehow, he always found her again. James began noticing changes in his wife. The way she jumped at unexpected sounds. How she'd begun checking the locks 3 times before bed. The dark circles under her eyes that grew deeper each week. "Is everything okay?" he'd ask, concern etched across his face. "Just stressed about the bookstore," she'd reply, forcing a smile that never reached her eyes. Then came the day James arrived home early from work and found Sarah frantically packing a suitcase. He stood in the doorway of their bedroom, briefcase still in hand, watching as his wife stuffed clothes haphazardly into a bag. "Sarah? What's going on?" She froze, then slowly turned to face him. For a moment, it seemed she might finally tell him everything. Instead, she closed the suitcase and said, "I was just organizing our closet." That night, James couldn't sleep. He lay beside his wife, listening to her uneven breathing, knowing she was awake too. Something was terribly wrong with the woman he loved, and she wouldn't let him in. The next morning, he made a decision that would change everything. While Sarah was in the shower, he checked her phone. He'd never invaded her privacy before, had prided himself on the trust they shared. But the woman he'd been living with these past few months wasn't his Sarah anymore. What he found shattered his world. A series of text messages from an unknown number: "You can't hide forever, Rebecca. Does your husband know who he really married? The money wasn't yours to take. Rebecca?" Who was Rebecca? When Sarah emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel, she found James sitting on the edge of the bed, her phone in his hand. The look on his face told her everything she needed to know. "Who's Rebecca?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah sank to the floor, the weight of her secrets finally too heavy to bear. "Me," she whispered. "My real name is Rebecca Collins." The confession broke something between them, a fracture in the foundation they'd built their marriage on. But it was only the beginning. Over the next hour, the truth spilled out of her like a dam breaking. Rebecca Collins had witnessed a murder 5 years ago, committed by Martin Reeves, a powerful businessman with connections to organized crime. She'd agreed to testify, entered witness protection, and became Sarah Henderson. She was supposed to start fresh, with a new identity and a new life. But then she met James. And for the first time since that terrible night, she felt safe. Loved. Normal. "I wasn't supposed to get married," she said, tears streaming down her face. "It violated every protocol. But I fell in love with you, and I couldn't. I couldn't walk away." James sat in stunned silence, trying to reconcile the woman he'd married with this stranger before him. "The U.S. Marshals don't know I married you," she continued. "If they find out, they'll move me immediately. And Martin's people, they've somehow found me. Those calls, the texts, they're from one of his men. So our entire marriage has been a lie." James finally said, his voice breaking. "No." Sarah, Rebecca, reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "Everything I feel for you is real. I just couldn't tell you who I really was." "You've put us both in danger," James said, standing up. "You've made me complicit in something I know nothing about." The look of betrayal in his eyes cut deeper than any knife. This was exactly what she'd feared, losing the only person who mattered to her. "I have to go," she said, reaching for her suitcase. "If I stay, you could get hurt. They'll use you to get to me." James blocked the doorway. "You don't get to drop this bomb and just disappear. We need to call the marshals. Tell them what's happening." But before they could decide what to do next, the sound of breaking glass downstairs froze them both. Someone was in the house. James reacted instantly, pushing Rebecca into the bathroom and whispering, "Lock the door. Call 911." The next few minutes were a blur of terror. Rebecca, huddled in the bathtub, heard shouting, then a crash, then silence. When she finally found the courage to open the door, she discovered James unconscious at the bottom of the stairs, blood pooling beneath his head. The intruder was gone, but he'd left a note pinned to James's shirt, "Next time, he dies." At the hospital, Rebecca made the hardest decision of her life. While James lay in a medically induced coma, she contacted her handler at the Marshals Service and confessed everything. "You've compromised your safety and his," the handler said grimly. "We need to move you immediately." "I can't leave him like this," Rebecca pleaded. "You don't have a choice. Reeves knows where you are. The moment your husband wakes up, they'll be back to finish what they started." Rebecca spent that night at James's bedside, memorizing every line of his face, knowing it would be the last time she ever saw him. She wrote him a letter explaining everything, her real identity, why she had to disappear, and how deeply, truly she had loved him despite her deception. "I married you because I loved you more than my own safety," she wrote. "I'm leaving for the same reason." When dawn broke, her handler arrived with new identification documents and a one-way ticket to a city she'd never been to before. As she prepared to walk out of James's hospital room for the last time, his eyes fluttered open. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice raspy. She froze, torn between running to him and running away. "Rebecca," she corrected softly. "My name is Rebecca." Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed by hurt, then determination. "Don't go," he said, reaching for her hand. "We can figure this out together." For one breathless moment, she allowed herself to imagine staying, facing the danger together, building a new life somewhere else. But the image of James lying unconscious, bleeding on their staircase, strengthened her resolve. "I love you too much to watch you die because of me," she said, pressing a final kiss to his lips. 3 months later, in a small town thousands of miles away, Rebecca Collins, now living as Jennifer Taylor, received a package with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, James, standing in front of a courthouse with a group of federal agents. The headline from a newspaper clipping read, Key witness testimony leads to conviction of business mogul Martin Reeves. Paperclip to the photo was a note in James's handwriting: "Found my own way to protect you. When it's safe, I'll find you again. Complete honesty from now on." Rebecca clutched the photo to her chest, hope blooming for the first time in months. She didn't know if they could ever rebuild what they'd lost, but for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she didn't have to hide anymore. Sometimes love means keeping secrets to protect the ones you care about. And sometimes, it means being brave enough to face the truth together. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe for more emotional journeys that remind us of the complex nature of love, trust, and redemption.